The wind howled over the empty plains like a forgotten lullaby, brushing past broken stones and crooked trees that hadn't bloomed in 100 years. Nothing lived here, or so the world believed. No birds sang. No flowers dared peek through the cracked earth. Even the sky wore a robe of dull gray, as though the sun had simply stopped looking this way. But deep beneath this barren land, where roots once tangled like dancers beneath the soil, a quiet light stirred. It came from a single chamber carved from rock and time, a hidden room filled with soft golden glow. The light spilled gently from hundreds of tiny orbs that floated in the air, each no bigger than a raindrop, and together they glowed like a heartbeat in the dark. At the very center of the chamber lay a cradle carved of moonstone, smooth and shimmering, holding a child fast asleep. She did not stir when the wind screamed louder above. She did not blink when a shard of light fell through a crack in the earth, brushing her cheek like the whisper of a dream. Her hair, the color of candle flame, curled gently around her face. Her small hands, delicate as flower petals, rested over her chest, still and calm. The world had forgotten this place, but the earth had not. A tremble shivered through the soil. Somewhere far away, something ancient shifted, and the faintest echo of song rose from deep beneath the cradle. Not a voice, not words, but a feeling lonely and strong, like a wish waiting too long to be heard. And then her eyes opened. Her eyes, soft as morning mist, blinked once, then again. They held no memory, no fear, only wonder, like someone waking from the longest sleep in the world. She looked around the glowing chamber, where the floating lights drifted and shimmered, like dream bubbles in the air. She did not know who she was. She did not know where she was. But somehow, she was not afraid. She stood, small and barefoot, her pale gown brushing against the cool stone. The chamber whispered to her with silent songs, as if it remembered lullabies she had forgotten. Her fingers brushed the air, and one of the golden orbs floated into her hand, pulsing warmly like a tiny sun. She held it close, and in that light, her name found her. They had once called her Elira. No memory came with the name, no face, no voice, no place, but it settled in her heart like an ember. The walls of the chamber began to tremble softly. The orbs floated higher, then drifted toward a narrow tunnel in the stone. Without knowing why, Elira followed. Each step she took, the chamber behind her grew dimmer, as if her presence had once kept the light alive. The tunnel curved and narrowed, rising like a coiled root through the ground. Her small feet touched moss, then dust, then stones, as old as forgotten time. At last, she emerged into the world above. The sky stretched endless and gray. All around her, cracked earth sprawled in every direction, like the skin of a sleeping giant. Towering cliffs stood far to the east, while a dried-out forest hunched to the west, its trees twisted like reaching hands. There was no sound, only the wind breathing slowly across the emptiness. Elira stepped forward. The wind caught in her hair and pulled gently, like it was trying to lead her somewhere. Days passed, though Elira did not count them. She walked through the lifeless land, drinking dew from leaves, sleeping under boughs that whispered long-lost stories. Strange things began to happen, quiet and small. When she passed by dry flowers, they lifted their heads. When her foot touched a cracked stone, moss would sometimes grow in her footprints. The world began to stir around her, shy and slow, as though remembering what it was to be alive. Farther and farther she wandered, until one evening, just before dusk, she reached the edge of a crumbling village. The houses leaned like old bones. No smoke rose from chimneys. No windows glowed. But there were signs that someone once had cared for this place. Dolls lay beneath broken porches. Wind chimes hung like forgotten voices. A tattered scarf fluttered from a post. Elira stepped into the village square, where a dry fountain stood, empty and cracked. She placed her hands on its rim. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then just a flicker, the faintest trickle of water bubbled from the center. She didn't smile, not quite, but her eyes brightened. She did not yet understand, but something inside her heart stirred. A purpose, a memory just beyond reach. Behind her, something moved. She turned and saw eyes round, wide, frightened, peeking from a cellar door. A boy, no older than herself, clutching a wooden spoon like a sword. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Elira raised her hand slowly, palm open. More children appeared, one by one. Thin, quiet, wary, they crept from ruined houses and behind broken carts. Some carried stones, others sticks, none wore shoes. All watched her. Elira knelt on the ground and touched the earth gently with her fingertips. Grass sprang up where she touched, soft and green. A few flowers followed, pushing through the dry soil like stars through night. The children gasped. They did not run. That evening, Elira sat by the fountain, surrounded by quiet children. One brought her a blanket, another gave her a wooden toy, its paint chipped and faded. They did not speak, but their eyes asked the same question. Who are you? Elira did not know how to answer. She touched her chest where her name lived like a secret and whispered it into the wind. Elira, it sounded like wind on leaves, like light on water. The children listened. The days grew brighter. With Elira walking among them, the village began to heal. The fountain gushed fresh water. Vines curled up stone walls. Fruit trees blossomed in the courtyard. Chickens long hidden in burrows clucked and scratched their way into the sun. Laughter returned, soft and unsure, but real. But far beyond the cliffs, in a tower wrapped in shadow, someone stirred. A figure cloaked in gray feathers and dust leaned over a pool of dark water. In it, they saw a girl with hair like candlelight, waking the land, calling life back to the world. The feathered one's breath hissed. Long ago, they had sealed the child beneath the earth, where she could not wake, where her light would never rise. And now, the song had begun again. The feathered one spread wide their cloak, and it billowed into storm clouds. The wind turned sharp, shadows crept across the plains. Creatures of dusk slithered from their holes, silent and cold. And in the sky, gray wings began to gather. In the village, the air grew still. Birds stopped singing. The trees shivered without wind. Even the fountain quieted. Elira stood in the square, her heart suddenly heavy. She could feel it, something was coming. Something old and bitter and cold. The sky darkened as a low hum filled the air, like the growl of a storm not yet seen. That night, as the children huddled in the safest cellar, Elira climbed the tallest roof and looked to the east. In the distance, black wings swirled, blotting the stars. A chill swept over the land, curling through her bones. Yet, she did not turn away. The light inside her had grown stronger. She remembered more now, echoes of a garden where children once danced. A song sung by a queen with silver tears. A promise whispered in a cradle carved from moonstone. She was not from nowhere. She was the light the world had once known. She was the one who must make it whole again. As the wind howled louder and the sky boiled with storm, Elira reached into her heart, not for courage, but for kindness. She would not fight the darkness with anger. She would meet it with what had always been strongest in her, hope. And as the storm approached, the earth beneath her feet began to hum. The vines thickened, the trees stretched taller. Flowers turned their faces to the wind. The world was waking. The Princess of Nowhere had been found, and the battle for everything was about to begin. The first shadow touched the village just after sunrise. It fell like a curtain across the rooftops, swallowing light as it moved. The children watched from their hiding places, silent and wide-eyed, their fingers clenched around each other's hands. The ground felt colder. The sky, once dull but open, now pulsed with heavy clouds swirling like great wings. Elira stood alone in the square. She was not tall. She had no armor, no shield, only a dress of starlit fabric and bare feet planted firmly in the soil. But the wind circled her like a friend. The earth below her hummed softly, matching the rhythm of her breath. From the east, a figure began to descend. Cloaked in gray feathers that flickered like smoke, the feathered one floated down upon a whisper of storm. No eyes could be seen beneath the hood, only a shimmer of shadow and ash. Their wings, wide and cruel, brushed the treetops and made them wilt. The feathered one did not speak, but the air around them seemed to. It trembled with cold fury and sorrow, as though the very wind remembered old battles and broken promises. Elira stepped forward. The feathered one raised a hand, and from the sky poured creatures of dusk, slithering, crawling, screeching things made from fog and fear. They raced toward the village, claws scraping, jaws snapping. The trees moaned, the earth groaned. But Elira did not run. She pressed her hands to the ground. With a sound like deep breath and thunder, vines exploded from the soil, thick and green, wrapping like arms around the creatures, lifting them gently into the air. Flowers burst into bloom beneath their feet. Light poured from every stem. The monsters hissed and twisted, but they could not bear the touch of growing things. They shrank, melted, vanished. The feathered one narrowed their wings. They drifted closer to Elira, the feathers of their cloak brushing the ground, turning grass to dust. Still, Elira stood. She looked into the hood, into the place where eyes might have been, and for the first time, she saw. She saw a face, not cruel, but tired. Not evil, but empty. Once, long ago, the feathered one had been a guardian of the skies, keeper of twilight, singer of the last song before sleep. But the world had changed. People stopped listening to lullabies. They built towers of stone and forgot the stories. The feathered one had faded, grown bitter, become shadow. Elira stepped closer. The wind howled louder, as though warning her away. The earth shook beneath her feet, but her heart did not waver. She reached out her hand. The feathered one flinched, feathers flaring. Darkness swirled around them. The monsters shrieked from the sky, circling like black crows. Then, the feathered one raised both arms. A wave of shadow erupted, a great dome of cold spreading out like spilled ink. It raced toward Elira, swallowing color and warmth. Trees froze, flowers wilted, the vines curled and fell. The children screamed from below. The light dimmed. Elira closed her eyes. She thought of the Chamber of Light. She thought of the boy with the spoon sword. She thought of her name, whispered by wind and stone. And she remembered. She remembered why she had been hidden, not to be forgotten, but to be kept safe until the world was ready to heal again. She was not a warrior. She was a seed, a hope, a promise, planted deep, waiting for the time to bloom. She dug her toes into the soil. She stretched out both arms. The light inside her ignited. It wasn't fire or flame, but something deeper, a golden, humming warmth that poured from her chest and fingertips like sunlight through leaves. It touched the oncoming wave of shadow, and where they met, the darkness paused. Then broke. The wave shattered into sparkling mist. The creatures vanished with a whisper. The clouds cracked open. And for the first time in 100 years, sunlight spilled through. The feathered ones staggered. Their wings drooped. The feathers faded from gray to soft white. The wind died to a hush. They fell to their knees before Elira, their hood slipping back. The face beneath was not monstrous. It was ancient, weathered, tear-streaked. A face that had watched the stars fall and rise again. Elira knelt. She placed a hand upon the feathered one's shoulder. Not to fight, not to banish, but to forgive. And as she touched them, the last of the storm unraveled. The clouds peeled away. The sky bloomed blue. Flowers lifted their faces. Trees unfurled their leaves with joy. The fountain in the village sang again. The feathered one bowed their head, and their body turned into feathers, soft, pale, drifting upward, carried by the breeze. One by one, they scattered into the sky until only a single feather remained. It floated gently down and landed in Elira's palm. She closed her fingers around it. The battle had ended, but something greater had begun. The storm had passed, but the silence afterward was not empty, it was sacred. The air felt softer, lighter, as though the very sky had taken a deep breath. Sunlight fell in golden sheets across the village, and the ground, once dry and cracked, now shimmered with life. Drops of dew clung to new grass, buds unfurled on branches as if they too had been waiting for this day. Elira stood still in the center of the square. The feather rested in her palm, glowing faintly with a warmth that pulsed like a heartbeat. It was the last trace of the feathered one, now part of the sky they had once guarded. Not a foe, not a villain, but a lonely soul who had forgotten their purpose. Elira's heart felt both light and full, like morning after a long, dark night. The children began to emerge. First one, then another, then all of them, stepping into the sunlight as though unsure it would last. They blinked against the brightness, eyes wide, hands still clutching small items of comfort blankets, toys, one child with a wooden spoon held close to his chest. They saw Alira standing there, unchanged yet transformed, and they ran to her. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. One by one they embraced her, small arms wrapping around her waist, shoulders, hands grasping hers. Some wept, some smiled. All of them understood she had saved them, not just from shadows, but from forgetting what it meant to feel safe, to feel wonder. In the days that followed, the village blossomed. The fountain flowed with crystal water, clear and cold. Flowers of every color pushed up through cobblestones. Trees bent low with fruit sweet enough to make the children giggle when they bit in. Birds returned, singing songs the wind carried far and wide. The children planted gardens. They patched roofs with bright-colored cloth. They painted the walls with stories and suns and stars. Laughter filled the air like music. And sometimes, when the light was just right, golden orbs would drift down from the sky and dance through the streets like fireflies. Alira lived among them, but not as a queen. She had no throne. She wore no crown. She slept beneath the trees or beside the fountain, always listening to the whispers of the wind and the quiet song of the earth. She taught the children to tend the land with care, to speak kindly to the growing things, to sing to the stars even when clouds gathered. And though the village had once been forgotten, now it pulsed with life. Word of the healing spread. Travelers came, drawn by tales of a girl who made flowers bloom with a glance, who woke the land with her footsteps. Some brought tools and seeds, others brought music and stories. All of them found the same thing, peace. They called her many names, Child of Dawn, Keeper of Roots, Princess of the New Sky, but she never corrected them. She simply smiled and led them to water, or knelt beside them in the fields, hands covered in soil, eyes shining with quiet joy. But one evening, as the sky turned soft with lavender and gold, Alira sat beneath a tree and closed her eyes. The feather still rested in her palm, now pale as moonlight, light as breath. She listened. The world was different now, but something far away still called to her. Not with fear, not with sorrow, but with longing. A gentle voice, old as mountains, singing her name like a lullaby. She stood. The children saw her rising and felt something shift. They gathered around her quietly, not with panic, but with questions in their eyes. She looked at them, each face dearer than the sky, each hand she had held now steady and strong. She touched their shoulders one by one. She smiled and brushed the hair from their faces. She pointed to the earth and the trees, to the stream and the seeds, reminding them without words that they were the keepers now, that the light did not live only in her, it lived in them too. And then she walked, not away, but onward, through the village gate, down the path of blooming wildflowers, beneath an archway of whispering trees. The wind followed her, playful and warm. The feather lifted from her palm, floating ahead like a compass, leading her where she was meant to go. She passed meadows where animals grazed, forests no longer afraid to grow, hills alive with laughter from distant villages. Everywhere she went, the land healed a little more. Not through magic alone, but through presence, her kindness, her quiet, her remembering. And slowly, people began to tell her story. They spoke of the Princess of Nowhere, a child born in silence who brought songs back to the earth. They said she came from the roots, from a hidden chamber of light, from a dream forgotten by time. They said her footsteps made flowers grow, her voice calmed storms, her hands carried peace. Children lit lanterns in her honor. Elders carved her likeness into trees. In every village touched by her presence, a single feather was painted near the gate, a symbol of transformation, of sorrow forgiven, of shadows turned to wind. Years passed. The children in the village grew older. They taught new little ones the songs Alira had hummed, the way to plant by moonlight, how to listen to the earth's hum. They told stories of the girl with hair like candlelight who walked into the storm and brought back the sun. No one knew where Alira had gone. Some said she became the wind itself. Others claimed she climbed to the stars and lived among the constellations. But every so often, on a still morning or a golden evening, a child would look to the horizon and see a flicker of light, a soft figure walking through a field, or a single feather floating down from a cloudless sky. And they would smile, because they knew she was still out there, still walking, still listening, still reminding the world that even the forgotten places, even the loneliest roots could bloom again. And so the Princess of Nowhere became the promise of everywhere, a light never lost, a hope forever found.